All these people come from different walks of life, but they have one thing in common.
I was home, it was just an ordinary day, and he said, "Oh, let's go sit on the couch. There's something I need to talk to you about." So he just came out with it. There was no preparation for it.
You begin thinking all again of the dreams you've dreamed for your child. And this was not one of your dreams. This was not in the plan of life you had hoped for your child.
I would sort of consider myself liberal, but when it came into my backyard and it was my son, then it was like I realized I was a little bit hypocritical.
The moment had come. I think he simply could not anymore feel like he was hiding who he was from his family. So he reached over and turned the radio off and said the 10 words that changed my life. "Mom, have you ever wondered if I might be gay?"
I certainly felt a lot of shame in my early teenage years, especially when I was very active in the church. Because that's what they were telling you, that it was to be ashamed of, that it was horrible, that it was all of these terrible, terrible things. But, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you go home and you think, wow, boy, am I all those things that they said? We're descendants of the founders of the Mormon church, some of the original prophets, and so the church was kind of a big part of our lives. We have a large extended family in Salt Lake City still, and a lot of our social activities and things that we did revolved around the church growing up.
Like most churches, they have always made the claim that this is just a sinful choice. It was so evil and so bad that we almost couldn't talk about it. It was worse probably than murderers or rapists. You just had the idea it was so terrible that it was unspeakable.
As early as age 7, I knew I was gay. I didn't know to associate the word gay with it necessarily. But I knew I had attraction to other men as early as that age. I desperately did not want to be gay. I was sort of spending those years trying to talk myself out of that. I can remember at age 12, in one of our Sunday school meetings, the priesthood leader that was giving the lesson said, "Oh, the gays, they're lower than the animals, and, they do all of these terrible things, and they're terrible people." And I definitely suffered from depression. I did all kinds of things to try to convince myself that I wasn't gay, up to and including in my prayers at night making deals with God, like, "Dear God, if you make these feelings for, other boys go away, I will do this. I will be the best at, at this, and I'll be the best at that, and I'll pray every day, And then when I didn't keep my part of the deal, essentially, that made me feel even worse about myself. I was afraid of disappointing my parents probably the most. My dad and I had kind of a difficult relationship at times, and I did fear what my dad's reaction might be.
It's so painful to even talk about it. And sometimes I even feel that why us? Why us? This is something, it's not acceptable in our scripture or any of our families or any of our societies or anything. And I always frame my children to be the perfect normal kid. And when this came up, I used to dream about it, that I must have gone wrong somewhere.
I try to convince him in different ways that you have so many girlfriends, just pick up one and get married. I said, just get married. After a while, maybe you change your mind.
I did tell him, I really don't think I can change. This is how I am. And he tried lovingly to tell me otherwise. And then he proceeded to give me a ring. In the Indian tradition, we believe a lot in the sort of astrological stuff. And he gave me a certain kind of stone that, with the sun rays sort of penetrating the stone and then reaching my skin would supposedly change me. And that was 10 years ago. And I have to report, so far, the effects of the stone haven't been that potent.
We are Hindu and we believe in Lord Krishna. And our scripture is Gita, Bhagavad Gita. As far as the preaching goes, there is not in Gita or anywhere there is a mention of gays.
I tried to convince him to marry a lady who is a lesbian, but he doesn't want to do that. We are worried about his future.
One point I felt like that I want to die, that why did I raise my son that way?
What's hard for me is my parents, because I really love them a lot, and I see how much it hurts them, and I would never want to hurt them, but it's so hard for them. They just don't, they're really scared. They don't want their families or their communities to find out.
Why I want to hide it?
Yes.
I don't want to be identified as somebody who is going to watch the documentary or film or whatever, that who I am.
We are a well-known figure in our community, and the issue might create some animosity, so I would rather not recognize myself.
Right now, my daughter is there to support him as a brother, but you never know when the daughter gets married to the guy, he may or may not like it. And that's why the straining of the relations between the brother and sisters.
Any community, any ethnic community, even the Americans also, they resent the idea of having a gay child in the family. But I guess in time, maybe you will learn to love.
He had every reason to think that we might do what other parents have done, which is to say to your child, you no longer live here. You're no longer our son. I've heard stories of kids who come home, their belongings are on the curb. I've heard stories of kids that come home and ring the doorbell at Christmas and they shut the blinds and will not answer the door. He had every reason to believe that something bad could happen to him too, and yet he loved us enough to take a chance.
Come on, Linus, come on. 15 or 16 years old, I started to say, so all these plans, all these things that I've tried aren't really working. And then I did start discussing it with people. And this, of course, was before I told my family. And, I was trying to prepare for this time that I would tell them. And I had a plan that I was going to tell my mother's best friend first before I told my mother, so she would have someone that she could immediately go talk to about it. And in the end, it didn't work out that way.
It was on a very beautiful summer day. I was going in the car with my son to do some errands, and on the radio came a news story about a gay bashing incident. So as the story concluded, he reached over and turned the radio off and said the 10 words that changed my life. Mom, have you ever wondered if I might be gay? And in that moment, time kind of stops. Everything else, you're still moving along in the car, but you have just heard something that you never expected to hear. And in that moment, as I try to go back and relive it, I think I was so afraid that if I did say to him once or twice, we actually did wonder, but dismissed it, said, oh no, it couldn't be. Anybody as wonderful and bright and caring and dear and good as our son couldn't possibly be that, because we had very limited categories of understanding of what it meant to be gay. So in that moment, when he said, Mom, have you ever wondered if I might be gay? I was afraid that if I said once or twice we'd wondered, I might confirm in his own mind, oh my gosh, Mom thinks I'm gay, therefore I must be. And your mind is just so rattled in that moment. So I took an easy way out, maybe, or maybe it was a wise way out, I don't know. I simply said, have you ever wondered if you're gay? And the answer is he didn't wonder anymore, he knew.
Her reaction was like 1,000 times worse than I thought it would be. Because she cried for no lie, 5 hours straight.
This is a picture of me and Antonio at my aunt's house. He was about 6 months old then. A little older than 6 months. Came home one day and Antonio was like, Mom, I got something to tell you. And I was like, well, what is it? So he was like, I just wanted to let you know that I'm gay. And I was like, First she was yelling and saying that
being gay is a sin, you're going to hell, God doesn't like that, why do you think you're gay? You had all these girlfriends, you had all these female friends who you hung around.
Ooh, it was a hard thing for me to accept. I cried, I screamed, I cried, I screamed. I got on the phone, I called my daddy, I called my mama. I was torn to pieces.
Her reaction said, oh my goodness, my child is gay. It's over. Leave, get out.
I actually did think about turning my back on him because I was, like I said, I was devastated. And it hurt me personally because, like I said, I was holding the blame for it. And when you holding the blame for something, it was like, you know, you just want to just get away, turn your back, go another way. But then I had to keep telling myself, that's my child, that's my flesh and blood. I can't walk away from that. It's just like him going out, killing somebody. Am I supposed to turn my back on him then?
People say that being gay is a choice. You choose to be gay. And I'm like, you have no idea. Why would anyone want to choose to go through what I've went through?
We end up going to counseling because I cried constantly. And I was like trying to figure out, how you gonna come tell me you were gay? I didn't understand that.
I didn't feel that my mom was happy with who I was. I didn't feel that she loved me because she put me in psychotherapy, like psycho crazy, you know. So that was very hard for me to have to go through these meetings and just feel stupid for saying that I was gay.
She kind of showed me that it wasn't my fault, that maybe it was something in him or something that could have happened to make him feel that way. So it helped me out a whole lot.
When I had a boyfriend, she didn't like it. She'll make little faces. And some little comments that she would say would just run me over or just hurt me for like a month.
I wanted him to be going through this phase. I wanted to be a phase, but it's not a phase. And it's not even a thought anymore. Because like I said, I done got over it. I done accepted it. And I done moved beyond it.
I always knew that my parents loved me, but I didn't know how it would go. I didn't know if they would encourage me to try and change my behavior. I kind of thought that they would. And I kind of thought that they would want me to go into counseling and things like that. And I had already made up my mind before I told them what my road was going to be. I mean, I made up my mind. There wasn't going to be a bunch of counselors. I wasn't going to be in our bishop's office at church, you know, trying to find ways to repent. I knew. I was like, this is it. I'm done. You know, I'm gay. This is the way it is.
I asked him if it would be all right if I told his dad, and he said that would be fine, and we went home. And turns out that Robert and I were getting ready to go on a little business trip together, and I went ahead with the preparations, being astonished that my hands still knew how to cook. I thought, my head is in this amazing place where I know that my life has just changed radically, irrevocably, and in ways I can't even understand completely, but my hands still know how to cook. Imagine that. It's just this strange mental place to be, almost like you're observing yourself from some unembodied place, observing that your life is going on when this amazing thing has happened. I should say that during the time I actually talked to my son, before I went home, he said, "Mom, you're not crying." And again, it was that feeling of being kind of frozen. And I told him, I will probably need to cry, but it's just not yet. But when we finally went ahead and finished our preparations for our trip and started on our trip, I told Robert that there was something I needed to tell him that was very, very difficult, and that's when the tears came. And I've since thought, why the tears? Why so sad? And it's because you fear for your child. It wasn't that I was ashamed of him. I didn't know how to even understand yet what he had told me, but I knew enough to be afraid for him. Afraid, and also you begin thinking all again of the dreams you've dreamed for your child. And this was not one of your dreams. This was not in the plan of life you had hoped for your child. But as I expressed to Robert what our son Kerry had told me, he immediately pulled the car into a strip mall. This was actually 15 years ago, before we had cell phones. But he said, I need to find a phone. And I wondered, I mean, again, with such an agitated state of mind, I couldn't imagine why he needed a phone. And the reason he needed a phone was to call our son. And I've loved him for a lot of years. I've loved Robert for a lot of years, but I especially loved him in that moment because he said, I don't want Carrie to worry even one more minute about what my response will be.
He stopped at a grocery store. And he said, I just want you to know that everything is going to be fine. Everything is going to be okay. You don't need to have any fear at all.
I had never met a gay person. And I'd never really thought other than negative things about gay people. Funny, squirrely, whatever. I can remember standing up in front of the deacon body, it's about 50 deacons, and saying, where do these queers get the belief that they're Christians? The Bible says they're abomination.
Earlier in life, he had gay bashed some people. I had no idea how I was going to tell him.
It was about 9 o'clock at night, and our son was home from college, his second year of college, and I was cleaning up the kitchen. And my son comes in and sits down at the table and says, Mom, can I talk to you?
She said, well, what are you going to tell me? I was like, well, I didn't want to do it at the house. I wanted to do it someplace. I wanted her to meet me for lunch so that we could go our own separate ways, because I just didn't know how she was going to take it. And I said, well, let's do this tomorrow. And she's like, and then she turned to me and said, are you going to tell me you're gay? And I said, yes, I am.
I honestly thought that he was joking. And I turned around and looked at him, and this is one of the defining moments in my life, because what I saw was such a look of fear and anguish that I knew that it was not a joke. And I remember hugging him and saying, Jimmy, it's okay. But I felt, like my entire world had just shattered.
She took it just really badly, because she would call me, be crying and upset, and I just had to tell her, I was like, I have enough of my own problems. I can't deal with yours. You need to go deal with your problems.
For the next 4 months, I think I probably pretty much quietly had a nervous breakdown. I would act like everything was okay, and then the moment that I was by myself, I'd go take a shower, because you can cry in the shower and your face won't swell. Dear Calvin, I've been reading a lot about homosexuality, and I really don't think it is something you choose. I know that Jimmy would not have chosen to feel this way. He and the literature says that being gay is more than sexual feelings, and I don't understand that at all. All I know for sure is that I love Jimmy, and I don't want this to be happening. I started writing Calvin letters, and every time I wrote a letter, I'd seal it up, and I'd put it in a drawer, and then I never looked at them again until I gave them to Calvin after I had told him that Jimmy was gay, so that he could see what I had gone through and what had helped me.
My mother told him first. I didn't tell him.
It's October the 19th, 1997, and it's a Sunday. And we have gone to church, and the sermon was on reconciliation. So we drive up and we pull into the driveway, and I start crying. And I tell Calvin, I said, Calvin, there's something that I have got to tell you. You're probably not going to like it. I don't know what's going to happen afterwards, but I have to tell you. And he kind of slumps down into his seat in the truck, and he says, you're having an affair. And that was that was the furthest thing from my mind. And I said, no, I'm not having an affair, but Jimmy is gay. And what I saw at that moment is probably the most special memory that I have, because Calvin looked like, all I can describe it as, is as a deflated balloon. And he says, I've got to find Jimmy. I've said things to him my entire life that have hurt him.
Over the years, you pick up things and you say things that I knew weren't right, that especially knowing that he was gay. So I wanted to find him and tell him, I was sorry for all that I had said, because we always thought we were a loving family and one that could tell and say anything to each other. And at that point, I knew that I had said a lot of things.
I didn't call him that night, but I called him a couple days later, and it was a very sweet conversation, just basically telling him, I was his son and would always be his son, and nothing would ever change that.
I'm a half Cherokee. My father was full-blood. My grandparents both full-bloods. And if you go way back in not just Cherokees but Native society, you will find those people, they were kind of honored because they were different from the others. And some of them were medicine men. Some of them were people that would give names to the children. But the thing that actually turned the tribes nowadays, there's a lot of people, was actually the early churches that come in and said, that's wrong. And one of the things I basically said was that I was a Native American who appreciated my son for who he was, because it's just another voice in the village to talk.
When I was growing up in the Mormon church, I didn't know that much about gay people. It wasn't talked about that much, but certainly the notion was that it was a choice and a sin, and the worst kind of sin. And I like to say sometimes that the worst kind of knowledge is the knowledge you have of things that aren't true. And we had to unlearn some things that we had been taught about homosexuality.
I remember it was Sunday night. It was late. It was probably 8 or 9 o'clock. And he said, do you want to go out back and talk? And I said, sure. And we had a gazebo out behind our house. And we took a bottle of soda and a bag of chips. And we went and we just started talking. And we talked into the night. And we probably talked for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. I think 1 bottle of soda and a bag of chips turned into 2 bottles of soda and 3 bags of chips. But we just chatted. And, he kind of just opened up and said, I just want to know. I just want you to tell me. Tell me everything. Tell me anything that you want to tell me.
There did come a night when I felt, as I actually didn't want to wake Robert up. He had to work, and I could not sleep, and there were a lot of tears, and I sat on my bathroom floor in the dark, feeling so sad for my son and so troubled over what this meant for him, what it meant for us, and had a little nightlight in the bathroom. And I felt that in that moment there came an answer to a prayer for me. I don't hear voices, I don't see visions, but I did have a feeling come over me and a clarity of thought. Well, the scriptural passage came to my mind, which is, I am the light of the world. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And it was a feeling of that weight being lifted off of me. And the answer that came to my mind is that my son didn't choose to be gay. This is exactly how God created him, that he is not shut out from God, he's not shut out from moral goodness, that I had to get up off the floor, stop crying, love him fiercely, and try to make the world a better place for people like him.
I'm Harold Kameo. Our daughter, Valerie, is gay. We found that out in 1988. I had a feeling that something was bothering Valerie, and I saw these things that Valerie had written. I said, what are these? And she talked about her fears of going to the Hollywood Gay and Lesbian Center to seek some help. And I said, what is this? And I remember tears just streaming down my face.
It was very in vogue then to tell your parents, no matter what happened, it doesn't matter, just be truthful. And so when my parents asked me, I sort of came out and quite angrily, and I didn't really prepare them, I think, in a way that if I were to do it again, I would have had some brochures on hand or something. But I was sort of angry and in your face, like, well, this is me, and if you don't like it, then that's your problem, without a lot of compassion.
I never heard of Asian gay people. I don't know of any Asian gay people. And so I thought our daughter, being the scholarly kind of person she is, I thought she was reading too much and wanting to be something that I thought was not possible. I was outraged, and I began following her around this house and saying to her, "You made a mistake. This is a bad choice. Don't choose this."
And she said, do you want to be a teacher? You should be kept away from small children. I'm going to have to divorce your father. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, if you don't know how to love a man, then, how can I still be married to your dad?
And so I said to her, "How sure are you?" Because I knew I was a clever mother. And if I had even 1% of a chance to work around it, that I could turn her around.
After our daughter came out, I went to a feminist bookstore in Westwood. I thought that if anything, a feminist bookstore would have books on the topic. And so a young girl came up and asked me, "May I help you, sir?" And I stuttered, and I could feel this cloud of Asian shame coming down on my shoulders and taking the breath away. And I stuttered and said, "No, thank you, just looking."
I was alienated from the church. I was alienated from my family. Before Valerie came out, you would have considered us to be, the model Presbyterian Asian American family. And so all of a sudden, we felt that we had this secret, this sadness that we couldn't talk to anybody about.
We just avoided the L word, and my parents told me not to write anything with the family name on it that had to do with being a lesbian. My dad told me not to bring anyone home ever.
And so finally, after crying for about 18 months, we went to our first PFLAG meeting in March of 1990 in Los Angeles, and that was where our education began. They helped me to understand that even if I knew my truth as a heterosexual person, that there must be one more truth.
I couldn't quite believe it, but it was good. It took me a while to sort of regain my trust in my parents again.
I'm not a stupid person, but I was ignorant and I was frightened. And I wish I could erase some of the nonsense that I said to her in August of 1988, but I can't.
There was actually a kid who committed suicide who I had met a couple times at parties, because when he told his parents, they freaked out, and he shot himself later that night. And that's terrible. Like, losing your life over something that little. It's really disgusting to me that some people can be that hurtful to something that is completely natural and healthy and okay and a part of life.
We live in Boulder, Colorado, which is a very progressive and liberal town. But we said, Cody, what if you were born someplace in the South or someplace that wasn't really as friendly, or you were born in the 50s or 60s, that what a different life you'd had, or different parents. And we often talk about, how fortunate all of us are to be in this kind of constellation.
I am an author and a rabbi of a congregation here in Boulder. In our congregation, which is a very liberal congregation and perhaps not the norm in mainstream American congregations, we are very open and liberal. And we have one of our chavuras, one of our fellowships is actually we call it Tribe 13. It's exclusively gay and bi members.
And I learned that being different didn't mean being worse. It meant just being yourself and being important. And it took me a long time to get that, and I was extremely fortunate to have the parents that I did. I couldn't have asked for more supportive or more open or more willing parents ever. I'm really lucky.
I've been part of groups of clergy who have tried to make public statements in our community that this is acceptable, these are people that we love, and we want to be careful not to marginalize them.
The church really condemns homosexuality. If you choose to practice as our priest said, be an active homosexual, not be celibate, then you are actually, you're offending God.
Religion is very important to us. We have raised both of the kids. They were altar servers when they were young.
Since I've been 16, and probably on one hand I can tell you the number of times I've missed Mass. The belief in God, the everything that is around it is extremely important.
I waited a while to tell my parents just for the fear that your role model and your rock in your life would tell you that you're living a life of sin, or you should, bottle it up inside and date a girl, and I'm sure after a couple months, you're gonna fall in love and it'll be okay. It's something that is not natural to me.
Greg told us the day after his last day of his freshman year in college. It was just the two of us alone. It was just Greg and I. And he said, "Oh, let's go sit on the couch. There's something I need to talk to you about." So he just came out with it. There was no preparation for it.
It takes a lot for someone to be like, I'm gay, because it's basically saying you're gonna accept me or you're not gonna accept me, and there's no gray area in between that. It was very, very nerve-wracking, because I knew once I had said that I could never go back.
As I started to come up the crest of the stairs, I looked on the couch and I saw Greg and I saw Rand, and I could see that there had been some tearing and some crying, and I said, okay, and he said, why don't you come over here, Dad? And I sat down, and I remember he said, there's something I want to tell you. He goes, and he told me, he said, I'm gay. And I gave him a hug. I reached out for him, and I remember he said, Dad, he said, I knew when I wanted to tell you and Mom, I was figuring how you're going to react, but I didn't know, so I had my suitcase packed. I said, everything's okay, Greg. He goes, Dad, can you hold me? Can you just hold me?
The reason that I cry, it always comes out that way, and I think it might appear that the tears are for, being sad about the fact, but it's just mainly because of Greg's torment.
After, telling my friends at school, I opened myself up. I give myself everything in a relationship now. And before, it was really hard because it always felt like there was one thing I was hiding in the back of my mind, in the small of my heart. And even though it wasn't a big thing, it's my sexuality, I've always felt like I wasn't being the person I could be with people.
2.5 years ago, if you would have asked us, I would have been very ignorant, and I probably would have said all the wrong things. And I know that there are so many people out there that, although they say that they understand, they really don't. They have those same misconceptions, I think, that I had.
St. Kevin's has been our church for 23 years. We were married there. Both of our children were baptized there. They were confirmed there. My father was buried there. And I don't really want to find another pew. And I'd like to be able to have the church recognize and accept, the gay population.
It's a hard thing to understand if you have never studied or been part of a religion that is strongly authoritarian. It's not just something you do on Sunday. It's something that informs everything you do every day of your life. And so to suggest that the church is flawed in this area is many people, they cannot grasp that. They just cannot do that.
We had a new pastor come to our church, and I typed up an anonymous question, and I just basically asked him, I'm having a difficult time understanding if God accepts everyone, if God accepts murderers, and he accepts everyone, why is it that he doesn't accept people that are gay? This was his answer, that the church does not condemn the sinner. God condemns the sin, and that was the extent of his answer. And that answer just really, really floored me, and I have had a very difficult time going to that church, listening to a man preaching to me, knowing that he's saying that my son is a sinner and my son is not accepted in the church.
If there was any type of sin involved, and I don't buy any of that anyway, it wasn't the sin of homosexuality or being gay or anything. It was the sin of dishonesty. And that's what was eating our son up on the inside.
The church's nominal position is it's okay to be gay if you don't act on it. That to act on your homosexual feelings would be immoral and would subject you to some kind of church discipline and in some cases excommunication from the church.
But of course, as your understanding grows, as ours has over many years, to me the immorality is to expect that someone should live their entire life without the opportunity to find love.
I know a lot of Mormon guys that have tried to change, to be straight. Some just counseling, some have gone to these crazy centers where, you know, they claim that they can change your behavior. I'm not aware of anybody that has successfully changed.
Young boys are being taught to hate themselves instead of to accept themselves for who they are. And in a very pernicious sort of way, they're being taught that they are so bad and so unworthy that it's not worth trying to be good. That why should they try to live a moral life if they're immoral by definition?
There was a day when I was out shopping with our daughter Bonnie, and someone came up to us in the mall and was extremely upset and in tears and saying, had she heard the news about their friend? It was a friend from high school who had died by suicide in the previous days. And when we remember back, I remember him standing in our kitchen when they were both seniors. He was the valedictorian of her high school class. He was bright and articulate and funny and wonderful. And I remember standing, he used to bake marble brownies, standing in our kitchen with a plate of his marble brownies, and they were full of dreams for the future. She was going off to Harvard and he was going to Yale, and there was some good-natured rivalry. But then, in the 3 years that passed, it was the summer before their senior year, we got this news that he had died by suicide. And of course, I don't know that Art came out to them, but everybody understood that that was the case. And a pivotal moment in my life, a true epiphany, was Art's funeral. When Bonnie and I sat in his Presbyterian church, I looked around at the distraught people sitting in the church, people who had loved him so well, and it occurred to me, these people have unknowingly contributed to his despair. They did not even know that the ignorance that comes over the pulpits are destroying our people, our young people. I sat with Bonnie's head on my shoulder as she silently sobbed, and I looked up in that church, and there's a beautiful stained glass window of Christ holding the lamb, and under it are the words, "Feed my sheep." And I was so struck with the notion this was a lamb we failed to feed. Worse still, he was starved to death. And I knew in that moment I could never be quiet again. I would try to be educated, I would try to learn, but I would never be quiet again on this issue.
I draw a parallel to the civil rights movement in the 60s. I often think that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be looking back on how we dealt with this issue. And, you know, I often ask myself if I had lived in the South in the 60s, you know, would I have been out there marching for civil rights, or would I have been beating people because they're there at the wrong lunch counter? And I don't want to be on the wrong side of this issue. And it's not just a difference of opinion. This is one thing that drives me nuts, is when they say, let's all hold a poll. Let's have a poll and decide whether we should discriminate against gays. This whole country is about not having a poll to decide who has which rights and who doesn't. People have rights, and they're entitled to them, and they must be protected. And if someone else's rights are not protected, then all of our rights are in jeopardy. Just as I remain a Mormon, I remain a Republican, and hope that my church and my political party can come around to the truth and to a better understanding.
You know, obviously I want equal rights for everybody. And it shouldn't stop with gay people. We ought to be able to get married. We ought to have the same rights that anybody else has. I live between New York and San Francisco, and I'm surrounded by gay people every single day because I live in gay neighborhoods in the two gayest cities in the country. But I have to remind myself occasionally that there's guys out in the middle of Nebraska, and there's guys down in Texas in small towns, and it's important to remember that there is still a lot of work to be done so these people can exist in their communities where they do stand out a little bit more.
I hate living in Cheyenne. There's not a lot of gay people opened. There's a lot of closet cases. They're probably scared because we did have a Matthew Shepard deal go on. That was because he was gay. And I think they're just terrified, and it probably haunts them. They're scared of getting their ass kicked.
Because we are the cowboy state and so judgmental of everything, not just the bikers. I mean, it's not just homosexuals. Bikers are judged. Everybody's judged here. And we had an incident in Laramie where a homosexual was beat to death. So I can understand where children of Cheyenne are scared to come out.
When I was in high school, I figured out if the rumors started getting around, I would have to be worried about my safety because a lot of the jocks they wouldn't understand and try to jump me.
I have noticed in Cheyenne that there are some gay cowboys. They're not bragging about it, they're not broadcasting it, because I don't think cowboys accept homosexuality. We're doing the interview here, opposed to the house, due to the fact that the gentleman that owns the house, he's not disproven of Trevor being homosexual, he just doesn't want to promote homosexuality.
They're your children. You should love them for who they are. If you push them away and hate them because of that, they'll disappear and you won't see your child again. If you truly love them, I don't think you want that to happen.
My parents are wonderful people, and the estrangement from them has been the most painful thing I think I've ever experienced. Their initial response, I'm sure, was to be quite concerned and upset, but I'm sure that what they felt is with the right encouragement and the right support, he would change, that he would not act on those feelings, that he would not sin, that he would stay true to the church, that he would marry, that he would move on in the life that God had ordained for him. And so over time, when it became clear that that was not going to be the outcome, not only was he not going to change, but we began to be very supportive and changed our point of view. We no longer espoused the position of the church on this issue. It was very difficult for them, and it's still difficult for them. It's very difficult. When our daughter was married a couple of years ago, we went through a very painful decision to not invite one of my sisters she and her husband have been harsh in some of the things they've said about gay people, and our daughter just felt that on her wedding day, she felt that she didn't want to have that feeling there, especially because her gay brother and gay friends would be there. And so my parents felt that they had to choose, and I understand what an awkward position it did put them in, but nevertheless, I wish they had made a different choice, but they chose not to come to the wedding. Those kinds of things become painful, and I do understand from their perspective why they felt they needed to make that choice. But families then become more distant.
There's George. My dad, once Jimmy came out, never talked to Jimmy since then. And it's really sad that he never picked up the phone or wrote a letter or did something to call his grandson and say, I don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever, you're my grandson. And I wish that he had done that, but he didn't.
This is from Spain. Look at what they put in all the organizations. So I'm not going to. It doesn't matter. We are going to get started. This is PFLAG for Families of Color and Allies. And all families are welcome here. We are here to keep families united. To me, it's a matter of justice. It's an injustice being done to so many people. So why I
joined PFLAG and I really have made the purpose of the rest of my life, because I know many families are being broken up over this. I know many children are losing their parents. I know many parents are losing their children based on ignorance, based on prejudice. So that is important to me, to try to stop it.
My Aunt Neela is my godmom. She has been an influence my whole life. When I figured out that I was lesbian, my mom was sad. She said, please go to a psychiatrist and let's figure this out. Maybe the psychiatrist can help you. And what she meant by that is help me not be gay, because it wasn't a good thing. And that's where I think Aunt Neela played a big role, educating my mom while I was going to therapy.
Having heard all these awful things and what homosexuality was, and then having a member of your family, a person that you have seen, a child that you have seen since the child was born, a person that was absolutely wholesome, good, kind, gentle, and that put together with the word lesbian didn't add up. So you had to find out, you had to put it together. And if you put it together for her, then you put it together for everybody. Tell us about you.
Hello, my name is Carmen. I'm here with my son, Louis.
The most difficult time is seeing people who get beat up in school, people who get trashed and talked about, and they get their lockers defaced and stuff like that. People who get thrown out of their homes because they tell their parents they're gay. It really, really bothers me. And I think once we get people to realize that there's no difference in us than there is in everybody else, then that'll be the turning point.
I would ask him, how was your day, honey? I had a great day, or I had a good day. But he didn't tell me who hit him. He didn't tell me who picked on him. He didn't tell me who called him names that I know hurt him and make him want to cry.
During class and at different times during the school day, they would just pass by and be like faggot and homo and fairy and all this stuff. And nobody was doing anything about it because in Catholic school, like, they didn't really do much. Since then, I've made it a point to make sure that nobody who passes me in the hallways says that to make me feel that way anymore.
I always thought Louis was so special because of the day he was born on. He was born on Martin Luther King's birthday. So I thought, for a civil rights leader, you know, all the great things Martin Luther King did, and then Louis was born on that day, I knew he'd be a special person.
I started a gay-straight alliance for the kids who couldn't be, you know, as out as I was. They look up to me in a sense because I'm so proud of myself and because I can be the leader of the group. And a lot of them are slowly becoming, you know, more comfortable with themselves, and they're starting to slowly come out to themselves and to their friends, and some of them even to their parents, which is really, really good.
I know I could die a happy woman if one day I could turn my home into a shelter. I wasn't destined to have one child. I was destined to have more than one child, so maybe I could fulfill that dream by just having surrounded by children who nobody else wants. You know, maybe I could get them to see the self-worth and what wonderful children they are.
I haven't spoken to my mother in the past 2 months because she kicked me out. And now I'm living with a family, and I haven't spoken to her in a while. My mother's reaction to me telling her I'm gay, she cried and she was angry and told me, you know, holding you in my arms, I would have never expected this. And I was like, expect what? And then she always like, well, if you are gay, I'm kicking you out. I was completely broke, didn't have anything. I packed my stuff, I had nowhere to go. If I didn't find this family to take me in, I would probably be in the shelter system, because that's what I was gonna do. But you know, everybody fought against it because you know, the shelter system isn't so safe for someone like me, and you know, so the family I'm with opened their doors to me.
We are probably, the LGBT community is probably like 10% of the population, and the disproportionate rate of homeless youth that are out there that are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender are up to 40%. There's so much intolerance out there. There's so much hate. Our youth are being killed, are being mistreated, don't have the same opportunities. They are facing mental health problems. They're facing substance abuse, and it's not fair. It's immoral. Someone's talking about moral values, and they tell us that we're not moral. That is immoral.
So often people get caught up when they are learning about homosexuality. They get so caught up on the sex part that they forget the love part. They forget that to be a homosexual person is about how you fall in love. And I often, again, when I've had opportunities to speak to other parents, I remember back as a child when I learned the facts of life, and I didn't believe it. I decided it was a lie, it was grotesque. And so why, and yet, when we understand what's normal and natural for us, we grow into that part of our lives, and it's wonderful. And the same is true for homosexual people. It's like, why do we worry so much about that? We need to just get over that and recognize whatever people do in their bedrooms is their own business. What matters is how people love each other, that everyone needs somebody who will go to the pharmacy when you're sick. Everybody needs someone to share the popcorn with. Everybody needs somebody who will meet them at the airport. Everyone needs someone that they can share their inner secrets with, their sorrows and their joys. We need to be loved.
We all have a civil obligation to make this a country that does accept everyone. And just because you're not gay or lesbian doesn't mean that you don't need to stand up and say when something's wrong. A lot of times we think that if it doesn't affect us, we don't have to work for it. But we all need to stand together.
To having our family, to Greg and to Lauren. In the eyes.
There's ignorances out there, or there's some just things that they're downright wrong, and we want to make a difference here. We want to advocate for them.
I've always said this. I don't want to change a hair on his head. I just want to change everybody else. Everybody else's thinking.
Mom is young.
That's my wedding reception dress.
Yes.
That's the last time I fit in it.
You're really tiny.
We brought the children into the world. It's our responsibility. I consider her a gift. She still is a gift, and I don't want people batting my gift around and telling me my gift is not a gift, because it is. Our gay kid is in New York, but we march in every parade in California. We do. And so my mission now is to tell, especially Asian parents, because Asian people do not like to address the issue. So we put our faces to the issue so that nobody can say to their gay child, I never heard of such a thing, because we are going to say, we are an Asian family, we have 3 kids, one of our kids is gay.
The world is a better place when we decide that we can love well and allow others to do the same, to be persons of integrity, to live authentically, and to have opportunities opened up where you don't have to slink around, you don't have to hide, you don't have to pretend to be something you're not. And what comes out of that is a wonderful growth, a wonderful peace, and society is better off.
My advice to parents that are going through this same ordeal that I went through is counseling is a must. It's a must, especially if you felt like it was your fault or you played a part in it.
Don't make your child feel like they're not loved, because that's the one thing that messes up everything. It makes it very hard to grow up.
That baby, when they put him in your hands, that's your child. And you should love that child no matter what.
Embrace the total person, and then you get the package. And sometimes the package is a little surprising, and you have to widen your own boundaries to deal with it. But I would encourage other parents just to be really open and feel the heart connection and love with your child, and then everything else really becomes secondary.
It would be so much easier for us if we could engage other parents like ourselves to stand next to us and have their voices heard with us. So our voice, we say today our voice is a whisper for what's right. We want it to be a roar that can't be ignored.
We need to learn and to understand and be aware of the effect that of the things we say that it might have on people, even our own children. People often say, well, I don't know any gay people, and our answer is always, you do, you just don't know that they're gay.
We all realize life is short, life is precious. We need to not let doctrine or dogma divide us. What ought to be most holy of all are the issues of the heart. And as I said before, God is love. That is the great command. They said to Jesus, trying to trick him up, what is the great commandment? And his answer was, of course, to love God and to love one another. The great commandment is the commandment to love. And so I decided long ago, I'm probably going to make some mistakes in my life. And even on this issue, if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to boldly make it on the side of love.